I'm Mike and welcome to the workshop. And this week we're going to continue working on the tool wall by creating better storage for my ever expanding collection of planes and a new set of chisel holsters which will make my chisels more accessible and also less likely to corrode. So let's roll the intro! So here's my current layout for planes. So when I started working in here I had a lot of my tools in storage, and these were the ones that I had here and I wanted to have easy access to. So it's quite good where you have our shelves for our number 4.5 and our number 5.5, and easy access then to my rebate planes and my block planes. And the plow plane is just there, I don't use it. And this is a good system. I'll zoom in here and kind of show you how it's laid out, and maybe you can make your own if you have a smaller amount. But what I want to do is to replace it with a wider rack that allows me to put planes that are not specific sizes on. I could swap it around, move it, give me a bit of freedom as my workflow evolves in the workshop here. So first we'll take this down and then I'll discuss what I'm going to make. But this is pretty simple. All I have here is a backing board onto which I put two shelves which my larger planes sit on, and then some dividers to hold in the smaller planes. So in the case of the block plane here, that little strip at the front starts falling out. You see here my wooden rebate plane sits in a groove, and my metal rebate plane is wide enough to sit there. But I don't want this to break. These are like hen's teeth now. So I want to make sure that all of these are really secure. So I'm going to make a sloping wall to hang them all on, so they're all tilted back like this, so they can't fall forward and hit the ground and break into tiny little bits. But this has served me well, and I may well use it again, so it isn't destined for fire. Let's start on a new one. Right, so as I said before, basic plan is we want to have this sheet on an angle so the planes are leaning back, which means there's less likelihood of them doing this. And also having it away from the wall here means that there's no real way for the damp to travel through. Hopefully there shouldn't be too much, because if you look at the previous video, I've insulated this wall and made a cold break. So the first thing I need to do is to make a little shelf here to stop the planes sliding off. So that's where we're going to start. So construction wise on this, I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. This is a very simple construction. I'm just going to screw it together. Like I said, I like to make my workshop fixings easily changeable as my workflow changes. So this is all just simple. Screw it together, no glue, so if I need to make changes in the future, or in this case where I assembled the box the wrong way around, it's easy enough to change it. So again, here this is just a handy tip when you work alone. Create as many hands as you can using clamps. So I'll just line this all up, then I'll flip it over, and that'll allow me to screw it in from the back. Alright, so next step is to make these wedges that are going to push it off the wall. This is very simple. I'll just cut a piece at the length I want, and all I'm going to do is draw from point to point and then split that line. So you can see there I have a diagonal. I'll go over to the bandsaw and split that, and then we can start assembling. Again, here we're keeping it very simple, stupid. I'm just tacking this together using my air nailer. You could use brad nails or you could use screws. This is just to get something functional for the workshop. It doesn't need to be the prettiest thing that's ever made. As long as it works and works well, that's all you're ever going to need. In addition to all this, I am adding this strip at the very back. This will give me a place to screw back. So as you can see here, I'm piling some at the top, and a few screws into that little angle there, and that'll allow me to fix it on. Now what I'm doing here is adding dividers to keep my planes, separated. Again here, just using glue because it gives me the flexibility to knock it out and change it if my planes change over time, or I have more of a preference for one plane over another. So this is just a slow process of just lining everything up, letting that glue set, and then doing smaller ones on the inside. You can see here I have these dividers just cut with a little angle on the top. I'll just be gluing them in place along that long edge and along the bottom. And then I use a piece of cardboard as a spacer to give me a little bit of extra space so those fit in nice and tight. And I just apply the activator to have everything set up nice and quick. Input those two little pieces of cardboard, and Robert is your mother's brother. So I want to make sure that I get it down, everything is nice and fixed, and then I pull out that cardboard really quickly because I don't want to glue it into place. And I repeat that exact same process for all of my longer planes, up to and including my block plane. You see here we're at the end, so this is the last plane. If you watch my Woodworking on a Budget series, you will have seen this little small adjustable 3.5, which was in the original kit. It is quite a handy little plane to have around, although the dial adjustment doesn't suit me quite as well as the traditional screw at the back. But still a functional plane, and one you can pick up for relatively cheap. The final design element here to keep the planes where I want them to be is I'm going to add little grooves to hold the handles. So you can see there I check the size of my handle versus a Forstner bit, and I'm just going to clamp this sacrificial piece on both sides. That'll allow me then to stick the point just between those two pieces and cut the half-inch shape I'm looking for. This is a great little tip if you want to do this kind of work. Let's say you're making a wine rack or something like that, you want to cut a half moon shape. This works really well because it just gives you a place for that point of the Forstner bit to go, and the Forstner bit gives you an excellent smooth cut. And you can see as I insert the plane, the wooden plane goes flank forward. The angle will stop this, but I also add a little strip in the front just to tighten it. So this is, after a bit of work, what we're going to go with here. So I have my spoke sheaves, they're just hanging on nails. It's the handiest thing really. The plough plane, pretty similar to what it was. And all of these, what I have here is the divisions, and I've taken a little scoop out for the handle. So they sit there, they lock in. You kind of see the scoop a bit clearer on this one. Eventually I may add wedges in behind here as well, just to give them a an easier way to guide in, but that can't fall down. All the way then up to my block plane, works like that. Then I have an old case here with my in desperate need of cleaning up and sharpening. What do you call those? Cabinets. Cabinet scrapers. And then just smaller stuff. My tiny little plane and my 2 rebate planes just sit there nice where they need to be. The idea of just gluing this on is if I decide, well, I want to get rid of this, or you know, if I get a proper joiner's plane, I can pull these out, redo it, and set that up for a joiner's plane. But now it's only a matter of deassembling everything and putting it up on the wall. Now it's time to move on to our chisel rack. First thing I'm going to do is bring you down and show you how my existing chisel rack works and what elements I'm going to keep from it. So this is my existing chisel rack. Let me just take out these screws here. You'll see how it was constructed. So this is made up of several layers. So if you see here, there's a series of screws. This is because these are actually made in several pieces. So now I have the assembly screws out, I can show you how this works. So basically what we have is a spacer and then a piece here where we cut out for where the chisel will go in. And on the back, another spacer. So each basic layer of this is made of 3 pieces. You have a front spacer, our little slot that comes in that cuts everything out, and then our back spacer. Then on the spacing, if you notice here on the back, the spaces are designed that with each layer, the center line of the chisel lines up with the gap between the handles. This means that when I put a chisel in here, there's a space for me to put my hand in and pull out, and not being interfered with by the row at the back. So what am I going to keep and what am I going to change with this design? Well, what I like about this design is that because it's made up of all these layers and they're only screwed together, if at any point I decide, oh, I don't want to have this particular row of chisels in my chisel rack, take out a few screws, put in a new divider piece, and it's adjusted. So I'm going to keep that element, maybe make it a little bit cleaner. And we're going to use hardwood. One of the issues I found with using plywood is it tends to soak in damp a lot more because it's all exposed end grain. So I'm going to use hardwood. And if you've been watching my videos for a while, you will notice that my chisel rack normally lives on a tilt like this. Now to achieve this, on this one I actually screwed a piece to the bottom, and that was screwed in at an angle. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to design a way that it's naturally tilted at an angle, so it's easy for me to get at my chisels, but also that it could come off and sit at that same presenting angle on the bench. So the first thing is to get out some material, and then I'm going to work on my layout, what I'm going to put in this, and then I'll show you how we marked out for everything. Okay, so after a little bit of thinking of what I want on all the layers, I have my first layer laid out. So I'm just going to talk you through how you might go about doing it. This is how I'm doing it. You might have to adjust it for your own. So I have all my chisels that are going to be on this layer laid out. This piece is going to be one of the filler pieces. So what we will do is basically, if I take this one out, we'll cut down those lines just wider than the chisel, chop it out, and that'll be our holder. So in terms of how we mark it out, so I like to arrange my chisels by size and sort of by type. I mean, the vast majority of these are bevel chisels, but I have these 3 square edge chisels, but I know I use them all the time. So this is going to be my kind of main layer that I want to have access to. And the key thing here is trial and error and finding what works for you. So basically what you want is enough space between your chisels that they easily go into place, they don't clash with the handles, but not so much space that you end up having large gaps and essentially, you know, wasting valuable space that you're going to need. So here I have my chisels arranged from 3 all the way up to my old inch. So that's going to be this layer, and I'll just kind of work with the rest of them, lay out the rest of the layers, and we'll do off this layer, test it, make sure I'm happy with it, and then we'll start assembly. The last thing I did was just went along and sort of leveled out as best I could the heights of the chisels and mark where I want this to stop. So you can see this longer one usually goes down to here further than the rest of them, as does this one. So the next thing to do is very carefully push all the chisels off, and now it's time to cut. Now I'm going to cut these one at a time because I want to get these as tight as I can in the width. I don't want too much wiggling, and we'll just chop it out and do them one at a time. So we'll start here with the 3mm and work our way up. So after spending a bit of time here cutting out all my different layers of chisels that I want, I'm happy, and now it's time to move on to making the module part. So with these, I showed you cutting out the little slots that they go into. You can see some of them are nice and tight, but I've also added a layer here, a separation between all of them, just to give myself a little bit more play. And what I'll be doing is, for these front 2 rows, I'll be gluing the slotted piece that the blade goes into to that, and on the back then I'll glue it to the yoke. That means then that over time, because this will just be bolted through, screwed through, and then covered with a front plate, if I want to change around new tools, I just need to take out that one completed one, put in a new one, and we're away in a hack. Let's get doing. And all the chisels have to come back out again. Why buy so many chisels? This is perfect to glue itself together. So I'm going to start here. I've already pre-cut some greaseproof paper that'll go between each of these layers, and I will just basically stack it up as it's being built. So where I don't want it to stick, I'll put in a layer of greaseproof, and we'll just keep doing that, gluing until we have the whole thing glued together, and then we can take it apart.
Now we're at the assembly stage. So what I've done here is I've stacked up all bar the top layer, and in that second most front layer I've pre-bored for some screws, and I'm going to do a true hole that goes down just as far as the last layer. I'll then be able to insert a long screw that will clamp all of these pieces together. Again, making sure that I put my screws in a place that isn't going into any of the voids I've cut for my chisels. When we have this all screwed together and nice and tight, we're going to put the front layer on with a nicer looking screw, because I want this to look a little bit fancy.
Now to apply the front face, we're going to use a few of these nice black flathead screws. Just makes it look a bit nicer. Still screwed together, but screwed together fancier. So for flathead screws, in anything, especially in hardwood, you're going to need to put in your pilot hole and your through hole, because these won't be able to pull themselves in. So I'm going to start here with my pilot hole, which is just bigger than the shank minus the threads. Then we'll drill a wider hole for the width of the shank.
This is a tip I've shown a lot, just using a piece of masking tape to create a simple visual depth stop. I don't want to drill the hole right through this. I want to keep it nice and as small as possible. And the only catch really, it happens a lot more with hardwoods, is if you're using a bit. It does tend to fill the flutes up, so just take your time and make sure to clean your flutes and you'll cut pretty easy. And the exact same for the piece that I'm going to use my true hole, because the shank is slightly bigger than the diameter of the threads. If I go too deep, I'll have nothing to grab onto. And to cut the base, I'm just using my circular saw here. I set it to about a 3-degree angle. I want to make sure that I don't cut through any of those screws. And then, because it's a little bit thicker, I finish it off on the handsaw. And then just square up all the ends, and the makeup's nearly done. We'll just put them all in and make sure everything is good to go.
Okie dokie. Okay, so we're almost there now. Everything fits, everything is nice. So the last two things I want to fit on here, my bradawl and my wheel gauge. And I'm just going to see where they fit comfortably and simply drill a couple of holes.
And as this was too nice to leave as it was, I applied a couple of coats of wax just to make it look that much better.
Right, So there we have it, 2 pieces of worktop organisation that you could make at home for your own tools. If you liked this video, as always, make sure to like, share, subscribe and all that fun stuff. And absolutely do try this at home.